The silence in the courtroom on that windy Tuesday, June 10th, 2025, was more than just quiet. It was alive and heavy. It pushed down on Chance Combs like a real weight pressing on her shoulders as she moved toward the witness chair. Every person in the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan was watching her. 1,000 invisible hands seemed to reach out, not quite touching, but definitely judging. Her heart pounded against her chest like a wild bird stuck in a fancy cage, just like the one she had been trapped in for so many years. For years, she had been invisible in the story of the Combs empire. The adopted daughter, often seen in family pictures, smiling nicely, a quiet figure in the middle of all the chaos. Now at 23, she was no longer invisible. She was real and strong and determined, and she was about to destroy the carefully built world of Sean Diddy Combs. Chance clearly remembered that morning. The sky over Manhattan had been a dull gray, matching the upset feeling in her stomach. She had picked a dark gray pantsuit, very different from the bright, fancy clothes Diddy had always pushed her to wear. It was a quiet rebellion, a small way of being herself in a life that had never really been her own. Also in Chance's mind that morning was Ava Combs, Diddy's adopted daughter, whose being there made the already tense situation even more complicated. Her dark, shiny hair, usually styled in fancy braids, was pulled back in a simple, elegant ponytail. She wanted to look strong and plain, every bit the woman who was about to tell her truth. "Are you ready, Chance?" Her lawyer, a nice woman named Sarah, had asked, her voice soft but strong. Chance had nodded, a dry lump forming in her throat. "As ready as I'll ever be." The walk from the waiting room to the courtroom felt like traveling for miles. Each step was a deliberate act of bravery. She could feel the stares, the whispers, the pure weight of what everyone expected. She knew what they wanted: scandal, drama, a look behind the fancy curtain of Diddy's seemingly perfect life. But she wasn't there for them. She was there for a younger Chance, for Mia, for Cassie, for every voice that had been silenced. As she walked into the sacred space, her eyes looked across the room. Reporters wrote frantically, their faces showing intense curiosity and serious determination. The public seating area buzzed with a low sound, a mix of Diddy's passionate fans and equally passionate critics, and then her eyes found him. Sean Diddy Combs sat at the defense table, his usual confidence worn away by weeks of harsh testimony. He looked smaller, somehow, less powerful than the giant she had known. His face, usually showing cool indifference, was temporarily stripped, bare, showing a flash of raw pain, maybe even fear. His eyes, dark and sharp, locked onto hers. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. A silent plea or a desperate warning passed between them. Chance held his gaze, refusing to back down. This was it. His lead attorney, the tough and famously aggressive Eleanor Vance, clearly tensed up. Her perfectly styled blonde hair seemed to stand up, and a slight red color crept up her usually pale neck. This was something they had not planned. For Chance Combs was an insider, a family member, and that made her testimony not just a revelation, but a betrayal of the highest order to Diddy's carefully crafted image. "State your full name for the record," the prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Evelyn Reed, said in a steady tone. Reed, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp mind and an amazing ability to expose lies, had planned this moment with the precision of an experienced conductor. She had waited for the perfect psychological impact. "Chance Combs," she replied, her voice clear and surprisingly steady, but with a slight shake that only those closest to the stand could hear. A wave of whispers swept through the gallery, quickly stopped by the judge's stern look. Reed began gently, establishing Chance's background, her relationship to the defendant, the years she spent under his roof. It was a careful process, laying the foundation for the emotional bombshells that were to come. Ms. Combs, Reed continued, her voice softening slightly. "Can you describe what life was like inside Mr. Combs's household?" Chance paused, her gaze drifting over the courtroom, avoiding Diddy's intense stare. She took a deep breath, the smell of old paper and nervous sweat filling her lungs. "It was a world of its own," she began, her voice gaining strength. "A fortress of wealth, yes, but also of control, complete control. collective sigh, almost impossible to hear, escaped the gallery. This was the raw, unpolished truth people had been hungry for. Eleanor Vance shifted in her seat, a slight frown creasing her forehead. This was soft, emotional testimony, hard to object to on legal grounds, but devastating nonetheless. Chance closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing the memories to flood in. The huge mansions in Los Angeles, the palace-like estate in Miami, the penthouse in New York, each one a fancy prison, carefully designed. My schedule, down to the minute, was controlled by an unseen hand, she told the court, her voice taking on a distant quality, as if she were reliving it. Ava Combs, my sister, and I often talked about it, she added. How our schooling was only tutored within the mansion's fancy walls. Even our friendships were checked, approved, and often ended at Mr. Combs's whim. She remembered a particular incident from when she was 12 in 2013. She'd met a girl at a charity event, a bright, bubbly girl named Chloe, who loved art and shared Chance's love of old movies. They'd exchanged numbers, excited about a new friendship. But within days, Chloe's parents had received a polite but firm call from Diddy's team, stating that Chance's schedule was too demanding for outside distractions. Chloe had stopped calling. Chance learned quickly that connections outside the family were rarely allowed. Ava went through similar things, Chance shared, her voice colored with a shared understanding. It felt less like a home and more like an elaborate stage. Chance continued, her voice now steady, filled with a quiet power where everyone had a part, and Mr. Combs was the director, producer, and only critic. She described the constant pressure to maintain an image of perfection. Every public appearance, every family photo opportunity was rehearsed. Smiles were practiced, poses were choreographed. We were performers, not a family, she said, her voice colored with deep sadness. Our personal lives were just another part of the brand. A low, sympathetic murmur swept through the courtroom. A woman in the front row dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Diddy's usual composed manner faltered, his gaze fixed on Chance. A flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. The real shockwave hit on Wednesday, May 28, 2025, during the afternoon session. Chance had spent the morning detailing the landscape of the Combs household, the whispers, the unspoken rules, the constant pressure to maintain an image of perfection. But now she moved to something far more concrete, something that tied the abstract control to a chillingly real act. Miss Combs, Reed prompted, her voice gentle but firm. You mentioned a legal document you were asked to sign. Can you tell the court about that? Chance's eyes, usually so composed, flickered with a raw vulnerability. This was the memory that still tightened her chest even after all these years. I was 14 years old. It was August 12th, 2015. I remember the date because it was just a few days after my birthday. I was still feeling hopeful, innocent, like the world was full of possibilities. She remembered the feeling of excitement, a rare emotion in her controlled life. Having just celebrated with a small, supervised party, she'd received a new sketch pad, a set of professional pencils. She'd spent the morning sketching, lost in her own world. Mr. Combs's lawyers, two men I had never seen before, came to the house, she continued, her voice gaining a surprising edge of anger. They sat me down in the grand library, surrounded by all those leather-bound books that no one ever seemed to read. It felt very official, very important. Ava Combs was there, too, Chance added, her voice a little softer, sitting quietly beside me. She was only 13 at the time, and I could see the same confusion and fear in her eyes. She described the scene with vivid clarity, the hushed tones of the lawyers, their serious faces, the stack of papers presented to her. They told me it was standard procedure, to protect the family from media intrusion, to keep me safe from the prying eyes of the tabloids, they said. It was just a formality, a simple agreement. And what was this agreement, as you understood it? Reed pressed, her voice a gentle invitation, allowing Chance the space to fully articulate her teenage understanding. Chance swallowed hard. It was a non-disclosure agreement, a very comprehensive one. At the time, I thought it was about paparazzi, about gossip, about not letting pictures get out. were stories about what we ate for breakfast. But in hindsight, I realized it was about silence, about control, about making sure I couldn't speak about what I saw, what I heard, what I lived. It was a lock on my tongue. They presented the same document to Ava, Chance elaborated, telling her the exact same things. We just looked at each other, bewildered, and signed. A low, guttural murmur swept through the courtroom, louder this time. A few gasps were clearly audible. The idea of a 14-year-old being pressured to sign an NDA, not by a stranger, but by the man who was supposed to be her protector, struck a chilling chord. Diddy's legal team exchanged frantic glances. Eleanor Vance's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the damage being done. "Did you have legal counsel present, Miss Combs?" Reed asked, her voice laced with a quiet disbelief that mirrored the public's sentiment. Chance let out a bitter, humorless laugh that held no joy.
"Oh, my legal counsel?"
Was Mr. Combs's legal counsel. They were his lawyers. They told me it was for my own good, that it was family business. I just signed it. I trusted him. I had no reason not to. He was the only father figure I truly knew. A single defiant tear escaped her eye and traced a path. Down her cheek, "There's a thin line between love and power," Chance told the court, her voice rising with an unexpected strength that surprised even herself. And in that house, everything slowly, insidiously tilted toward power, not love. Never truly love. It was a transaction, my silence, my obedience, for my place in his world. The words hung in the air, a devastating accusation from the most unlikely of sources. The man who had cultivated an image as a doting father, a benevolent force in the industry, was now being exposed by the very person he had taken under his wing. The public gallery buzzed with a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. A woman, in the front row, openly wept, her face etched with empathy. A young man, a hip-hop fan who had once idolized Diddy, sat with his head in his hands, shaking it slowly. His disillusionment obvious. The trial had been a parade of shocking revelations. On April 22nd, Mia, a former assistant, testified about a life of terror and multiple sexual assaults. Chance and Ava, seated in the courtroom, felt profound sadness for this stranger. Hearing Mia speak, it was like a part of my own story was being told, Chance thought. That pain, it was too familiar. On April 25th, the infamous surveillance video from the Intercontinental Hotel, dated March 5th, 2016, was played, showing Diddy assaulting his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Gasps of horror swept through the courtroom. Ava, seeing the Cassie video, visibly recoiled, tears welling up. Both she and Chance had witnessed similar violent moments within the home and lavish parties that devolved into nightmares. I remember one particular party. It was around late 2017 in the Miami mansion, Chance recounted, her voice raw. Music was deafening, the lights were flashing, and there were so many people, many of whom seemed dazed. I saw him physically push a young woman into a room with a male guest, her face clearly showing fear. I saw him verbally abuse a male musician who refused to participate in an activity he deemed inappropriate, threatening to destroy his career. Ava, sitting next to Chance, nodded, the memory seared into her mind. Remember that night, Chance, when he dragged that girl into the room? Or when he screamed at that guy for saying no? Other witnesses followed. Capricorn Clark detailed an alleged kidnapping. Don Richard described Diddy's physical assaults on Cassie. And stylist Carrie Morgan accused Diddy of assault and hush money. May 20th, Daniel Phillip the Punisher gave the most lurid testimony, describing being paid to engage in sexual acts with Cassie while Diddy filmed. At this point, Ava and Chance could no longer bear it and abruptly exited the courtroom, their faces ashen. Later that day, during a short recess, Chance and Ava found a moment to speak with Cassie Ventura, who was present in the courthouse. Chance gently took Cassie's hand. "Cassie," she began, her voice filled with profound empathy. "We know we saw things. Not everything, but enough to know what you went through was real. We're so sorry. We wish we could have done something then." Ava, her eyes welling up, nodded vigorously. "Yeah, Cassie. We always wished you could have just gotten away. We talked about it sometimes, quietly wishing you were safe. Cassie, her beautiful eyes softened, squeezed Chance's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It means more than you know to hear that, to know I wasn't alone in seeing it." "You were never alone, Cassie," Chance affirmed, her voice firm, "and you're not alone now. We're here for you." On Friday, May 30th, 2025, Chance Combs returned for cross-examination. Eleanor Vance, Diddy's lead attorney, approached with the predatory grace of a lioness. "Miss Combs," Vance began skeptically, "you claim to have been so controlled, so silenced, yet here you are speaking freely. Isn't that correct?" Chance met her gaze unflinchingly. "I am speaking now because I finally have the courage, Miss Vance. Because the truth demands to be heard. Because others suffered in silence, and I won't let their stories be forgotten." Vance pressed on, implying Chance sought a lucrative book deal or a reality show. "You accepted the benefits of Mr. Combs' generosity for years, didn't you?" Chance paused, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. "I was a child," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I didn't choose that life. I was born into it, then adopted into it. Every gift felt like another chain." "Miss Vance, so you're telling the court that all the love Mr. Combs showed you was merely a facade for control?" Vance challenged. "Love and control are not mutually exclusive in his world." "Miss Vance," Chance countered, her voice steady, almost mournful. "He loved the idea of control, the power it gave him. The problem was, when that loyalty wavered or when the facade cracked, the love vanished, replaced by something cold and terrifying." Diddy flinched at the defense table, his eyes on Chance now unreadable. Legal experts agree that Chance's testimony, if it held up, would be devastating. Professor Lena Chararma from NYU School of Law commented on NPR. "The prosecution's strategy is clear, to dismantle Diddy's carefully curated image of a benevolent mogul and loving father. Chance's words expose a darker reality of alleged psychological manipulation and fear." As the courthouse doors closed on Friday afternoon, May 30th, 2025, the echoes of Chance Combs' testimony lingered. The fate of Sean Diddy Combs now rests with the jury. But regardless of the verdict, one thing is clear: the silence has been broken. Chance Combs, once imprisoned within gilded walls, has become the architect of her own voice, opening a difficult but necessary new chapter of truth and accountability in the once untouchable empire.